All right, ladies and gentlemen. So I got a request from the Comeback Kids to do a Paladin PV or tanking guide for Phase 3 of Season of Discovery. Um, I ended up getting on Discord and basically set a date with Talric. I forget his actual name. Let's see if we can find it here. But yeah, we're gonna end up doing a tanking Pally class, or not Pally class, Pally cast tomorrow on the subject, so you got to look forward to that. But I had to ask him a bunch of questions on the subject. But what I really wanted to do is just get a bunch of math. So I spent like the last 6 or 7 hours, like literally my day, putting up all this stuff. A huge component of it was like, well, what gear are we wearing, kind of a deal. And then, of course, crunching the numbers and yada, yada, yada. However, after I was done crunching the numbers and I started so I basically I did this paladin right here, and I got the paladin to beat, right. I was like, okay, this is the gold standard of tanking. We know this one is going to be super super good in phase 3. We know what those talent points look like. And then I had to look at, like, the shield block paladin, like what's he going to be doing. And then I had to look at like the seal of martyrdom paladin. And very quickly, it became painfully obvious that a prediction that I made back in phase 2 on the subject was 100% going to be correct. Turn off the light, please. Thank you. Love you. Was going to be correct. And that prediction was that once Blizzard gave us strength, stamina, intellect gear for tanking, the Seal of Righteousness Paladin was going to 100% start beating the Seal of Martyrdom Paladin. The only thing that was actually making Seal of Martyrdom Paladin in Phase 2 even remotely viable, there were two things. The first thing was the incredibly stupid and obnoxious normalization of the thing, causing it to do like 87% weapon damage at a 1.3 weapon speed, which is like, okay, that's just weird. And the fact that you had to choose between wearing strength gear with no int on it, or stamina intellect gear, or spell power gear with no strength on it, right? But flash forward to phase 3, and that's not really happening anymore. There's also some key notes here that we need to take remember into consideration. I still have no idea if Seal of Righteousness times 2 procs Wind Fury or not. It probably does, but I actually still have no idea whatsoever. It's also important to note that issues with Seal of Martyrdom Paladin are still present and accounted for in phase 3, and that issue was round about 20% critical strike or melee crit chance. It's between 18 and like 21% melee critical strike chance. You start being completely overwhelmed with GCD usage. To the point where any additional melee critical strike is basically completely useless. And that goes basically double for like the whole Wind Fury procking thing, if that makes any sense. So what this means is in objectively within about, like, it's more accurate to say between 15% and 18% critical strike chance with Wind Fury around. You start just any additional critical strike doesn't do anything for you, which is actually kind of interesting. But let's look at the Paladin to beat here for a second. So actually, let's look at her gear. Okay, so the Paladin to beat's gear is very interesting. She's wearing almost full PvP gear. Knight's Lamellar, there's that strength, there's that stamina, there's that spell power. Even the set bonus gives you more spell power. She has a few interesting bits of gear that you could replace. So, for example, you have two options as a tanking paladin. Option 1 is to try to hit mitigation cap. Option 2 is to say, to hell with mitigation cap. I'm going to armor tank these bosses and then get as much spell power as I possibly can. And that's what this paladin is trying to do. So they're wearing a couple of interesting pieces. So, for example, I have arena vamp bracers here. They have tons of armor on them. You could easily replace them. Judgment bindings. Oh, yeah, I went up to level 60 to make a point. Lol, let's go back down again. Derp. You could easily replace them with the engineering epics. You could easily replace them with berserker's bracers. Yes, your spell power will go up. Yes, your TPS will go up, but you also lose 100 armor, which is it later on in progression. Losing the 100 armor is fine because your healers are stronger, but early on in progression, especially when it's something you can just buy off the auction house, no, pretty please put on something that is armor chunky if and where possible. But it's perfectly fine if you put on berserker bracers as well. The other interesting piece we have here is the belt. This belt, I don't know where the hell we're getting this thing from, but she's really, really tanky on the armor. You can see we're gaining like 170 armor on this belt. Like, what the balls? Yeah, Blackrock Depths, absolutely amazing. Go pick that thing up. There's almost nothing that really compares to it. Like, the best thing we got going on here is like a bunch of strength, which will give you spell power. So I look at this 21 strength, and I immediately read that to be like plus 14 spell power, and a bunch of attack power, which is not bad, but you could also compare, like, seriously, like 160 armor on progression. All I have to do is go into Blackrock Depths to get the damn thing. What do you think we're going to do here? Yeah, so definitely go pick up this belt. You're supposed to be armor tanking, and that's what we're going to do. But the important thing to note here is you could actually gain more spell power. And also the reason why these things are here is because strength, stamina, spell power gear doesn't actually exist for these options. But really good armor gear does, and that's basically your second BIS. Your main BIS is going to be strength, stamina, spell power, and then your secondary is going to just be stamina with a ton of armor. And then your third and final option to put on your character would be strength, agility, stamina. Okay, in that order, basically. Yeah, but anyways, full Knights, yeah, full Lamellar gear. Love to see it. Gauntlets, I don't think no. Gauntlets are also Lamellar. Sergeant Major Lamellar. Rings, just normal spell power rings. Nothing interesting. This one's kind of interesting. You could put another spell power ring on if you wanted to, but this one has 60 armor, and it has an increased chance to hit with spells and attacks. Yeah, I'm taking that instead, if at all possible. I even put on a Smoking Heart of the Mountain. I have no idea how easy or difficult it would be to get a Smoking Heart of the Mountain in Phase 3, but she has armor, and we're an armor tanker, so it is what it is. Why are we using Hammer of Righteous Judgment? Well, it's because it has armor, and it is what it is. Notice our enchants are all armor kits, as opposed to like more stamina. Like, why are we doing that? It's because we tank using armor. So we're an armor tanker, and so we're gonna tank using armor. Just is what it is. Let's talk about Hammer of Righteousness here for a second. Some people might have it in their mind that eventually, okay, you'll be losing out on so much damage in Hammer of Righteousness, and you'll be losing out on so much damage in Flurry Axe, which is the other thing to take besides a Hammer of Righteousness. Hammer of Righteousness's benefit over a Flurry, her negative is that she does less white damage, but her benefit is that she's consistently a 1.3 weapon, whereas Flurry Axe is 1.5, and then sometimes she gives you extra auto attacks. Flurry Axe desperately needs to be used with Seal of Righteousness for the ×2 proc. With Seal of Righteousness and the ×2 proc, she is effectively a 1.3 weapon speed, more like a 1.29 weapon speed. But those double hits can cause interference with Art of War if you're taking Art of War, right? Which is not quite as good as the far more consistent 1.3 weapon speed. That being said, if you have Holy Shock, there's an argument to be made for a 1.5 weapon speed, because she, in theory, won't really interfere with doing Exorcism and Holy Shock on cooldown, right? But that's not actually how that works in the grand scheme of things. That just doesn't survive. It's a bad theory. That's basically what I'm trying to say. It does not survive contact with the enemy. But yeah, so some people might have it in their mind that eventually the loss of DPS and the one-handed weapon will become so extreme that Seal of Martyrdom might make a comeback, Or it might just be better off to use the somewhat slower but higher DPS one-handed weapon. And I'm about to tell you that that is terribly and horribly wrong. So, for example, let's just give a case of example here, right? If I swapped out this weapon for Hungering Cold in Season of Discovery Phase 3, let me just check to make sure I'm recording here. Yeah, we're recording. If I had access to Hungering Cold in Season of Discovery Phase 3 right now, and I could use it, right? The best one-handed weapon in the game, the 89 item level, 73 DPS, 140 armor, 14 stamina, plus the sword skill, 1.5 speed one-hander. The big daddy one-hander of classic World of Warcraft. If I could use it right now in Season of Discovery Phase 3, it would actually be worse to use for Seal of Martyrdom than this stupid little thing right here. Okay? For the Holy Shock Paladin, or for a spell power-based Paladin, I don't know. She might be better or she might be slightly worse. What I do know is that on Era, a Flurry Axe, if you get over 550 spell power with a Flurry Axe, she actually starts out DPSing Hungering Cold. Like, beyond any shadow of a doubt, she starts out DPSing Hungering Cold. And if you're fighting any kind of target with Arbor, she super out DPSs Hungering Cold. Speed is everything when it comes to Seal of Righteousness and her DPS, okay? So there's a very, very good chance that I'd actually do less damage with a Hungering, or less threat per second with a Hungering Cold right now in Phase 3 than I would with a Hammer of Righteousness. That's not going to change anytime soon. When you click on this and I scroll back down to, like, level 40 and we look at all the other different gearing options, right? Like, you got this thing like the Equipped Sanguine Blade where it's like 1.5 speed, 35 DPS, stamina, intellect, increase your holy spells effects by up to 24. No. This thing is better. Okay? Are we done? Okay, cool. Unless it's literally Hungering Cold, this thing is going to be better. I know it's terrible. I know it's terrifying, but it is what it is. Okay, so this is the Paladin to beat, and her talent trees are very weird. Okay. Actually, is this? Are we actually wearing the right gear here? Judgment Band. Yeah, you got full Lamellar. This is the Paladin. All right, talents. All right, so her talent tree actually looks weird. Yeah, you put 5 points here, you put 5 points there, and you pick up Consecration. Even though you're using Seal of Righteousness, and this thing, unless Blizzard changes it, this thing only increases your SOR damage by 2, not 2 DPS, just 2, meaning if it did 100 damage before, and you put 5 talent points in this thing, it will do 102 damage per hit. Now it increases it by 2, because it only increases the base damage of 20 by 15%, which is just hilariously bad. Not all the spell power ratio behind it, right? She does, however, increase judgment damage by 15%, and there's nothing better to take here, so that's why you go there, and you're just going to this tree to pick up Consecration and nothing else. Yeah. You are then putting 5 points into Readout for what it's worth. It's not worth very much, but it is what it is. You're putting 3 points into Precision. You're actually maxing out Toughness because you are an armor tank. You're putting 3 points into Improved Righteous Fury, and then you're done. We're not touching this tree anymore. We're completely done here. So it's 11, 16, and then your Benediction. You put 2 points into Improved Judgment for the 8-second Judgment cooldowns. Judgment is a massive part of even why SoR Paladin can even compete with SOM, let alone is better than, like, Art of War SOM, assuming Seal of Martyrdom still times 2 double procs, right? Get 3 points here just for the hell of it, and then you can dump your remaining points into Critical Strike. And just know that the points you're putting in here right now actually don't do much of anything. We're going to see that in the math here in a second, okay? So her build looks really weird. If you tried a Holy Shock build, you'd put 31 points into the Holy Shock. Let's compare it to Seal of Martyrdom here for a second. You'd end up with 31 points in here, but you could only put 10 points in the protection tree, or you could only put 8 points into here. Judgment's completely worthless. Parry haste is kind of valuable to you, but you can't get deep enough right now at level 50 into the good stuff for Seal of Martyrdom tanking, right? You don't get improved Righteous Fury with a Holy Shocks Seal of Martyrdom Art of War tanking. You can't do it. You can't do that to level 60. You can't get into Conviction for the increased critical strike, which we've already talked about, is basically useless to you, right? You're going to hit that wall. So what are we doing there anyways? At best, we're getting precision, and we're getting toughness in the build. It's just not that great. All right, let's look at the math. Zoom in here really fast. Okay. So we can see that SOR, she does about 88 damage per hit with a 1.8 speed weapon, which comes out to be about 156 TPS, considering we have the 2.3 multiplier, which is really, really good. Judgment of Righteousness, as you can see, is also worth a metric crap ton of TPS, which is awesome. Part of the thing that's going on here is she gets multiplied by 15% and then multiplied again by the fact that this 1.1 is basically for Fanaticism, a 20% critical strike chance. Exorcism is still doing what Exorcism does. I suppose I should talk about runes, but we'll come to that when we come to that. You take Fanaticism. You actually can take Aegis if you want to, but you really just Horn of Lordaeron. That's perfectly fine. You're taking Purifying Power over Hammer of Righteousness. And part of the reason for that is the DPS gains off of it, right? So what it effectively does is it reduces, it doubles the effect of this. So basically, this rune right here is giving me 80 TPS, right? Which is massive. And you have to ask yourself, is Hammer of Righteousness going to give me 80 TPS on this build? And the answer, of course, is no. Is Hammer of Righteousness going to give me 80 TPS even on, like, the Seal of Martyrdom Paladin, which might be inclined to take that stupid 1.5, 35 DPS one-hander, which, incidentally, let's pull it up, a calculator here really fast. 35 minus 8, it's basically 19. Okay, so that's 16. What are our stats? It would end up being like 40 for the sake of argument here. Yeah, because we have about 600 attack power. It was like 120 divided by 14 equals. Yeah, it is what it is. Plus 8 attack power equals 24. Let's get the hell out of here. Damage is 53. Okay, so I think I have to add 53 to this. Plus 53. Okay, cool. 77. So with that weapon, if I swapped it out and I equipped the actual attack power here, we can just do it really fast. I mean, what am I doing here? Dragon's Call, no. Eclipse, okay, cool, boom. And I have to account for the massive increase in attack power. Yeah, so 77 is about right, because by the time you have the extra 120 attack power, that's only going to be plus 9 to this, and it is what it is, right? Yeah, so you're going to do like 77 DPS. Oh, yeah. And I get to multiply that by like 4. Oh, yeah. And it'll do that like holy damage. So that's going to do like 300 holy damage. Let's go get them. I don't know. We don't want that. We want this. And we want talents. And we want this thing. Yeah. Hit the target 4 times your main hand damage per second as holy damage. Yeah, that'll hit pretty hard. That'll do 300 damage. What do you think the cooldown is on this thing? Like what is that? But we have to compare it to Purifying Power, right? So, Hammer of Righteousness, sometimes she has a 6-second cooldown. Sometimes she has a 10-second cooldown. I have no idea what she's going to be. I have to assume that she's going to be a 10-second cooldown. Otherwise, she would be a little bit broken in PvP. So in the grand scheme of things, she does about 30 DPS. I multiply that by 2.3, and you can see that we're gaining 70 TPS from this weapon while using this really shitty one-hander that causes Seal of Righteousness to do significantly less damage. Right? Not the greatest thing in the world, I'll tell you that right now. And even then, she still doesn't do enough damage to compete with the other rune. So the rune is just better. She did 80 TPS. You follow me on this? Okay, cool. So it's Purifying Power is the way to go. If Hammer of Righteousness is 6 seconds, then it's a different story. But if she's 2 seconds, you know, it is what it is. But I still don't like the fact that we're using the other bad weapon. So you're going to be using Purifying Power 100% of the time. You're going to be using Hand of Reckoning, of course, because of the increased threat. Art of War, borderline useless. So says the math. It was actually really fascinating to actually do the Art of War math. By the time we get down to Art of War, I had to make some interesting assumptions. You actually have... this was a different build, too, because I tried like 11, 13, 17 to actually get like a 5% critical strike. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, you know, maybe the critical strike will be more valuable. You know, maybe the parry haste will be more valuable. Get more attacks out. You know, maybe Art of War will be worth a damn. At the end of the day, Art of War was only actually worth like a measly 33 TPS, like a whopping 14 DPS. You might be like, what the hell is going on there? She's a little bizarre. So the problem Art of War has is that she is in conflict with the natural... Her DPS is in conflict with the natural cooldown of Exorcism, if that makes sense. And once we increase the value of Exorcism, and we have, because we've doubled its effect. We literally just took a rune that halved its cooldown, right? This is in direct conflict with Art of War, all right? And it becomes very difficult to try to figure out the math on this. So I eventually just went with the 1 in 4 rule. What the hell is the 1 in 4 rule? Well, okay, well, the 1 in 4 rule is basically the RNG effects. And you can be like, okay, well, every 4 rolls of the dice, basically, every four RNGs that come up, 2 of them are going to be basically average, like half of the time there's going to be an average outcome. And then the other half of a quarter of a time, you're going to get one extreme outcome on one end, and then the other quarter of the time, you're going to get another extreme outcome on the other end. So if you think about it that way, basically how this works. This is telling me that Art of War is going to be proccing once every 12 seconds with this 11% crit and this build. All right? I'm gonna get an Art of War proc every 12 seconds. Well, when that Art of War proc happens, I have to ask myself, to what degree is it interfering with the natural 7.5 second cooldown of Exorcism? And if we use the 1 in 4 rule, half of the time it's going to be half interfering. 25% of the time it's going to be completely interfering. Or completely wasted, meaning it was about to come off a cooldown naturally and then Art of War proc, which means the Art of War proc is completely wasted, right? 25% of the time that's going to happen. 50% of the time it's going to only be like a 50% negative. And then 25% of the time she's going to be basically 100% free and good to go. By the time you do the math on that, you begin to realize that this means that Art of War is only going to be about 33% as effective as you think she would be at a 12-second proc rate. But generally, it's just 33% in general. And hopefully I got that math right, but I have no idea. By the time you start factoring in Wind Fury procs and all that stuff, it just ends up being the same. Yeah, she was really hard to do the math on, but I was surprised to find how little value she had in this gearing. It's such a low amount of TPS that I would actually suggest on progression swapping out Art of War for Sacred Shield. And no, I'm not joking. And of course, if you need the mana, swapping it out for Guarded Light. So one of the major advantages to the SOR build is that this rune slot is actually pretty damn free. Now, if Hammer of Righteousness starts showing herself to be like, well, I'm a 6-second cooldown, not a 10-second cooldown Hpally time. Then I'll have to come back here and do the math again and be like, well, is this blade actually worth it over the longer one because it does more damage? And then, of course, I have to ask myself silly little questions like, well, if I took Hammer of Wrath over doubling the effect of the Exorcism rune, does that mean Art of War is back on the table? And the answer is yeah, that actually does mean Art of War is back on the table. But for assuming a 10-second cooldown on the Hammer of Righteousness, Sacred Shield is probably the way to go with this gear, believe it or not. This in conjunction with the armor is what's going to make you super tanky, and you're probably even better off if you're taking Sacred Shield. You could start losing this belt here for some spell power belt or some attack power, some strength, spell power stuff. You can start losing this, right? You don't need armor as much anymore because you have Sacred Shield operating for you. Sacred Shield is worth its weight in gold. Of course, Sacred Shield's not going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. If you have another holy paladin in your team, they're going to want to take Sacred Shield, and you can't have 2 Sacred Shields on you at the same time. So at that point, you're better off actually taking Art of War or something else. Heck, you might have mana issues because you have a Sacred Shield on you from an actual holy paladin. But yeah, during progression, highly advised Sacred Shield. I was incredibly interested to find that Art of War was not actually doing much of anything for us in this build. Yeah, so that's basically the Paladin to beat right there. And as you can see, her TPS is actually quite monstrous. That 40 white DPS you need to take with a grain of salt because I just didn't really do the math on it. I was like, well, it's going to be around about 40 against, I literally don't care. I literally don't care to do the math on the white DPS. But 586 threat per second with this build. She is the Paladin to beat. So the next thing I started looking at immediately was the shield block Paladin, since Blessing of Sanctuary, improved Blessing of Sanctuary kind of went Super Saiyan, right? She's telling us weird things like double the effect of Blessing of Sanctuary. The damage reduction for Blessing of Sanctuary comes after armor. So the more armor you wear, the less effective Blessing of Sanctuary is, which is not great. Very, very effective for like two-handed tanking, but you're getting punched so hard from the bosses in SoD that reducing incoming damage by like 20 is not that impressive. Increased damage done by your Blessing of Sanctuary by 30% of shield block value is insane on paper. And I decided to actually go and investigate what the heck that looks like if we're talking about a Holy Shield Paladin. At level 50, okay, here's why things are so polarized at level 50. And I'm basically smacking you in the head repeatedly, telling you there's only one Paladin tanking spec at level 50. At level 60, we can start re-examining things. And here's why. So if I put 31 talent points into the prot tree, I'll only have 10 talent points left over to put into the holy tree. I cannot both have Holy Shield and Consecration at the same time, which means I start having to ask myself really struggling questions, which is this 120 threat per second Consecration worth losing in exchange for Holy Shield? Like, is that a trade I want to make at level 50? At level 60, I can get both, and it doesn't matter anymore, right? The other thing that's super polarizing is, of course, if I want to get Holy Shock for the Seal of Martyrdom Art of War thing, I only have 10 talent points left over, which means this is as deep as I can possibly get in the protection tree. I can't actually pick up Seal of Righteousness. So at level 60, I can pick up Seal of Righteousness, and we'll have to re-examine the math, because suddenly she'll have the 2.3 times multiplier. But right now, you can't do it. So this in conjunction with the fact that we're actually getting strength, stamina, spell power gear, which is our BIS tanking gear, it's also our BIS PvP gear, is making it so that there's only one Paladin to beat here. And that is this stupid, weird thing. It's Seal of Righteousness Paladin all the way, with the fastest one-handed weapon you can possibly get. But I looked at the block math just for the sake of argument, and I had some weird questions. Question number one is, I know a little bit about how the plus 30% block value from Aegis works in conjunction with the plus 30% from shield specialization in the prot talent tree works. Basically, you get 2 plus 30%. Drakova told me in phase 1 they don't compound, and I haven't bothered to test it since then, so I still don't. I'm going to operate off of the idea that they don't compound, they just add together multiplicatively. Gearing, current gearing in phase 3 is showing us that this is the base block value of a shield at 34, and then you can put on enough gear that you end up with like you end up with like 215 block base, or not 215 block. You end up with 185 block base, and then the question becomes: does this 30% affect the 185 block value, or is it only affecting the 34 block value? I asked guys who should know this, and they were telling me that shield specialization does not affect plus block value from gear. However, I do vaguely remember Drakova telling me about it on Era, that it does affect it. So I have no idea how the shield specialization block mechanics work. And Lord knows I have no idea how the Aegis block value work, and I wouldn't be able to know until I actually got access to the gear and play tested it. But since I'm so sick and disgusted with the Emerald Nightmare, which I'll make a video about tomorrow, I'm just no. I'm not going to be there to test it. So you guys are going to have to test it your own damn selves and tell me in the comments below how it works. But what this basically means is you're going to have anywhere from 115 block value to like 300 effective block value, which is kind of insane. I have no idea which one is going to be there for us. I just took the middle ground and said, whatever, it's going to be about 250. I'm assuming shield specialization doesn't do it, but like Aegis does, kind of a thing. Like Aegis is functioning properly, but the classic WoW talents are not. It's like, okay, cool. So then I had to make a few assumptions. I was like, okay, Holy Shield is not going to have a 100% proc rate on her. At best, she's going to have like a 75% proc rate, meaning that every time you use Holy Shield, you're going to end up expending like 3 of those 4 charges against a boss that's hitting you every 2 seconds. That's very reasonable and very generous on my part. It's actually probably a little bit lower than that. Okay. Holy Shield only has a 20% spell power ratio behind her. It's literally 5% spell power ratio per block. Okay, per block. 5% spell power ratio per block. So if you're using 3 of those, it's not very impressive. So this is your base block. Reflect damage is 95, and then the plus 12 is from the 240 spell power that this gear actually has. So you end up doing like 107 holy damage per block, and then if I multiply that by 3 and divide it by 10, because you can only do this thing every 10 seconds, you end up gaining a whopping 32 DPS off of Holy Shield alone. I ended up making very similar predictions with Blessing of Sanctuary. So I assumed that Blessing of Sanctuary would have a 75% uptime. What do I mean by this? I'm taking a drink of water. Yeah. So, when you have Holy Shield and Redoubt / Aegis active, I'm just going to call it Redoubt from now on, but know that it's both, it's either Aegis or Redoubt, it's the same thing, right? When you have both Holy Shield and Aegis active, you have a 68% block chance. When you have them, when you have one active and the other one's not active, you end up with like a 38% block chance. So the assumption here with Blessing of Sanctuary is that 75% of the time during a boss fight, I will have a 38% block chance. Not less than 38, not more than 38, just 38% block chance. Meaning somebody is going to be there for me 70% of the time. Either Aegis is going to be there for me, Redoubt is going to be there for me, or Sacred Shield is going to be there for me. Even if they overlap, it's kind of the same mathematical deal. So 75% of the time, I have a 38% chance to block. And if I assume a 250 block value for the shield, this means that Blessing of Sanctuary will strike back for 21. That's what she normally does. and then also plus 75, which is a 35, which is going to be 30% of 250, right? So she ends up reflecting like 96% damage back, but she's only doing that 38% of 75%, which only ends up being 18 DPS. And so in total, I'm spending a rune and a buff slot, meaning I didn't take Blessing of Kings, right? I also don't have Horn of Lordaeron, which is interesting. I have to do these 2 runes. So this rune is not only opportunity costed against like Fanaticism and against Wrath with this build. I also have to 100% have to take Aegis with her, so I can't take Horn of Lordaeron, which is one of the big, massive, huge, holy fuck advantages to the Seal of Righteousness tanking Paladin. Is that she gets to take Horn of Lordaeron. The Seal of Martyrdom Paladin doesn't get to take Horn of Lordaeron. She has to take Seal of Martyrdom, which means somebody else has to take Horn of Lordaeron over Seal of Martyrdom. So that means now we're talking about a Reck Paladin who you've somehow convinced to take Horn of Lordaeron over Seal of Martyrdom, which is nuts. Right, that's not going to happen. He's over there, like, giving things the business with his manual crowd pommeler and the normalization effect. Right, he's doing 330% weapon damage, literally, in the same space. Per auto attack. It's like it's insane. Right, he's not taking Horn of Lordaeron. So one of the massive advantages to the Seal of Righteousness Paladin is she takes Horn of Lordaeron. Because she can. She doesn't care about anything else, right? So I have to opportunity cost this against frickin' Fanaticism, which is going to, be buffing my Seal of Righteousness damage by 10%. It's going to be buffing my Judgment damage by basically 10%. It's going to be buffing my Exorcism damage by 10%. I don't think any of these reflect damage can't crit, but you get the idea, right? It's like that's one hell of an opportunity cost. And then it just doesn't do anything. So this is terrible. I'll avoid this like the plague. Basically, very quickly, I came to the conclusion that this build is awful. Stay the hell away from it, right? So comparing this, and you don't have Consecration. So all this is still opportunity costed against the fact that you don't have fucking Consecration, which is doing 51 DPS compared to this thing, literally doing 50 DPS, maybe 51 DPS. So I'm like, nope, Consecration is the clear winner here. You factor in the opportunity costs on the seals, and it's not even close. The only thing you can say about the block value Paladin build is that she is so insanely tanky, so nightmare fuelishly tanky, that you might not actually need to take another dedicated healer. You could take another DPS into the raid. But that's like some weird min-maxing stuff. So if your raid is like, we only really have one healer and the other guy's like, flex healing, it kind of sucks. Take this Paladin. Take this Paladin if for whatever reason your guild or your raid is suffering on the healing side of things, right? This thing is a tanking monster. It can damn near solo tank bosses. That's how terrifying this thing is. But from a TPS efficiency perspective, not so great. You can see she has less armor because she actually did strip off those armor pieces to try to get a little bit better. She doesn't need armor as much, right? She got the block thing going for her. Nope. This thing is still the Paladin to beat. If I geared up a Paladin to do a Seal of Martyrdom build, it still wouldn't be as good, right, as the Seal of Righteousness Paladin right now, to be perfectly honest with you. And again, I'm going off the logic that the math was abundantly clear back in Phase 2 that as soon as Paladin got their strength, stamina, spell power gear, let alone strength, stamina, spell power, critical strike gear, as soon as tanks got that gear, the Seal of Righteousness Paladin would be objectively superior to the Seal of Martyrdom Paladin. I do not have to do the math on that whatsoever in Phase 3 because the only thing that has changed, mathematically speaking, from Phase 2 to Phase 3 is they gave us that gear. That is the only damn thing that changed, okay, from A to B. And these two were basically identical in performance with each other, with it arguable that the Seal of Righteous Paladin was slightly superior. At this point, there's just no mathematical contest whatsoever. Nothing mathematically has changed. The only thing that has changed is that everything is now in favor of the Seal of Righteousness Paladin. At level 60, we'll have to re-examine, because the Art of War, Seal of Martyrdom, Seal of Righteousness Paladin, not only do their weapons gain more damage, right? But suppose, theoretically, the strength, stamina, spell power, critical strike gear comes online. And when that happens, the Seal of Martyrdom Paladin, well, both Paladins will benefit from it, but the Seal of Martyrdom Paladin will get a little bit of a bonus from the fact that there's just spell power kicking around for no good reason. The Seal of Martyrdom Paladin will no longer have to choose between, like, strength critical strike gear or strength spell power gear. It'll just be on the same gear. But more importantly, they'll gain access to those precious 3 talent points in the prot tree, so that they can actually gain a 50% TPS modifier. All this math here is without the 50% TPS modifier. And we'll, so yeah, I'll have to re-examine the math at level 60, but right now there's just no contest whatsoever. Anything else to say? Not really. Okay. Is what it is, boys. All right, so let's just examine the build here for a second. Let's recap. Since there is no contest here, I have done my due diligence. I am a good Paladin theory crafter. Yes, indeed. Good boy Paladin theory crafter. We're still recording, right? Okay, cool. So it is full Knight's Lamellar gear, like all 6 pieces of it. The bracers and the girdle, you're either using the stamina armor. I would do that for progression. After progression, you're going to want to throw on, you're going to replace these with spell power gear, literally. I don't even care if they're cloth. Just replace this stuff with spell power gear. Some of the mail gear is saying weird stuff, and I hope this stays in the game. Specifically, it's it's for the boots. I'll give you an example. It's the shunned devotees. Whoever put this in the game and labeled Paladin / Shaman on it, I want to kiss them. One thing I've been despising in Season of Discovery that doesn't really exist, but it exists a little bit in Classic WoW, so I can't blame them, is the fact that as an Alliance Paladin, I do not have access to Shaman mail gear. I've always wanted access to Shaman mail gear, because some of their gear is amazing. Like in AQ40 on Era, some of that mail gear is for Paladins like give me. But you can't get it to drop as Alliance, because in theory, who the hell would want that stupid Shaman gear? Well, the answer is Paladin wants the stupid Shaman gear. This gear is absolutely awesome. What are you talking about? Because it's always like, critical strike, stamina, intellect, spell power gear. It's like, hell yeah, sign me up for that. It has less armor. I don't give a flying fuck. Yeah, so some of this gear is amazing. If I could find some of this for that, I absolutely would. And whoever, I'm hoping that's not a bug. It's like, oh yeah, Paladins can also use this. I'm like, thank God. I'm like, praise Jesus. Hallelujah. So I was really excited to see that. I was like, damn, give me more of that. Oh, that's beautiful. I like that stuff. Yeah. So on progression, use the armor gear. Otherwise, I don't mind if you use the other stuff. But you just want stuff with spell power. You want to replace this stuff with spell power as soon as possible. Then everything else is just as much spell power as you can possibly pack on your Paladin. Nothing too spectacular. I've made some interesting choices here and there to pick up armor. On progression, armor is going to be far more valuable than anything else. Your TPS is probably already through the moon. If you're pugging at any point, assume you're technically on progression, which means you're going to want to use this build and nothing else. Like, oh, I'll swap this out for more spell power. No, you don't, because you have only do that if you've discovered that your healers are Chads in your pug, and you're like, hey, I'll switch it out for more TPS, or if you actually desperately need more TPS. Yeah. And of course, put on as much of these rugged armor kits as you can possibly slap on your Paladin. And yeah, do not take this weapon. This weapon is terrible unless they want to make that one rune better. Unless it's better than 10 seconds. Nope. We're scrolling. Don't take a flurry axe. Take this bad little boy right here because yeah, she still has armor on her. And Paladin's armor tank. It is what it is. Oh, I need to find like 25 or something, right? Next season of Discovery should have it. Talwar, I'm still pissed off I never got that. That's really making me angry now that I'm looking at it. Hello, can we please get the Hammer of Death? Thank you. Yeah, take the Hammer of Death. Shadow Oil is here. Why is Shadow Oil here? It's a good question. Try to remember why. Whether you're taking Shadow Oil with Seal of Righteousness, you'll notice I didn't add that to the math for TPS. When you're taking Shadow Oil, well, I need the numbers here. Thank you. When you're taking Shadow Oil or Frost Oil, it's just a math question. Would you fuck off? I want this thing. Okay. So you can see here that we have like 332 spell power. They're probably gonna give you another Nomergon buff or something stupid like that. That'll probably pump this up to like 400. At that point, you have to start asking yourself questions. If you're using Seal of Righteousness, Shadow Oil versus Frost Oil becomes a legitimate debate, and it's centered entirely around your spell power and the speed of your weapon. If your weapon is slower, or if you're using Seal of Martyrdom, so you don't have the ×2 proc, Shadow Oil starts becoming better very, very quickly. So at 400 spell power, this is basically how the math would work. Frost Oil, or I'll just tell you the figures. You can do it yourself. Right, so Shadow Oil does about 120 shadow damage base. Oh, right, I have it on there because I originally this Paladin was the shield block Paladin gearing. Right, okay. She has 120 damage base, but then she also does 60% spell power ratio. She has a 15% chance to proc, but she has a 10-second internal CD, which means you can only get one proc every 10 seconds at most. And but in practice, what that means is that you'll get it to proc once, right? And then you have to wait 10 seconds before it can even have a chance to proc again. And then you have to proc the damn thing again at 15% chance per weapon swing, right? So very quickly, that's like ×7, which means I need to swing the damn weapon for 9 fucking seconds before, statistically, I'll get it to proc again. Which means that even though she has an internal CD of 10 seconds, in reality, with a 1.3 weapon speed, she only procs once every 19 fucking seconds. Terrible. Shadow Oil is much better with two-handed weapons or slower speed weapons than she is with fast one-handers because there's going to be some overlap between the GCD and your weapon swing timer with the slower speed weapons. Like, what the hell? What are you talking about, Hpally time? Okay, well, if I have a 3.8 speed weapon, right, and I get it to proc Shadow Oil, right, the next 2 attacks, I'm going to miss Shadow Oil proc chance. But you'll notice when I add another 3.8 weapon speed on this, I don't lose the third attack. Right, the third attack, I have a 15% chance to proc it. Basically, is what I'm saying, because the cooldown immediately ends, and then I at least have a 15% chance to proc the thing. But moral of the story is, Shadow Oil is only really good if you're using it with SOR or Seal of Command, things that increase its proc chance already. But she's actually terrible. So in other words, if you're using Seal of Martyrdom, she would proc once every 19 seconds. If you're using Seal of Righteousness, she might proc like once every 15 seconds, because at least you got the ×2 proc going on there. Kind of a similar story with Seal of Command and a two-handed weapon. She ends up like a 15-second proc chance thing. But yeah, she does lots of base damage. But if you start having spell power ratio behind you, very quickly Frost Oil becomes better. Frost Oil has a 28% spell power ratio behind her. She has a 10% proc chance. She has no internal cooldown, and she does ×2 with Seal of Righteousness. So in effect, she has a 20% proc chance. So if I had like 400 spell power, I take 28% of that. That ends up being 112. She actually has a base damage of like 28 or 30. I'm just going to say 30. So that means every time I get a Frostbolt to proc, it'll do 140 frost damage. And then I'm, every weapon attack has a 20% chance to proc the damn thing. Ugh. Let's just do 100 attacks. Yeah, so let's see here. Yeah. Okay, so if I swing for 13 seconds, that's going to be 10 auto attacks. I need to get DPS, right? So 10 auto attacks, each with a chance to proc. I'll proc it. I'll get 2 procs in basically 13 seconds. 400 time, get the 28%, add the 30 equals, and then I multiply that by 2, and then I divide that by 13 seconds. Because I get 2 procs in 10 weapon swings, which is 13 seconds of weapon swing. Those 2 procs will do 284 frost damage. Now I'm dividing it by 13 to get DPS. Congratulations, it will give me 21 or damn near 22 damage per second, or TPS to add to this, 580 whatever the hell total. Okay, so you're probably using frost oil. If we're doing shadow oil, I could do shadow oil really fast here if you want. We're assuming shadow oil is going to proc every 15 seconds. She will do 60% of that 400. Go away. 400 times 0.6 equals plus 120 equals. And then she's going to proc every 15 seconds of swing time. Yeah, 3 seconds every 15 seconds of swing time. So I take this 360 and I just divide it by 15. 24. Yeah, so you can see it's very close. Hard to really say which one's going to do better, frost oil or shadow oil there. I'm not 100% certain, okay, that Seal of Righteousness times 2 procs frost oil. Very, very difficult and very, very expensive to actually test. I've just never bothered to do it. So if it does proc it, maybe it's better. If it doesn't proc it, maybe it's worse. Worst case scenario, just slap on a frost oil and away you go. But yeah, so there's no contest here for all the reasons I stated before. Absolutely no contest whatsoever. The reason is there's just no reason to re-examine the math. Once again, your talent tree is going to be 5 points in Divine Storm, 5 points into Seal of Righteousness, 1 point into Consecration. You get readout for shits and giggles. I'm not joking. Like, oh, I get an improved Devotion aura. It's like, it's not. You're technically an armor tanking paladin, so I don't know. Maybe you can do that. But if there's like a second paladin around, which is your more ideal situation because you can get access to Sanctity aura and all that stuff, you're gonna be preferring to use. Well, the problem here with going the stupid ass armor aura is that half the time we want to use a resistance aura. The other half the time we just want to use there's another paladin around and we want to use the Holy Reflect damage aura for more TPS. So it's like, just split the difference and pick up readout. Like, fuck it, whatever. Take readout. I literally just take readout for what it's worth. If nothing else, the audio cue tells me that I'm getting smacked around really hard, and it tells everybody else around me that I'm getting smacked around really hard, and they might want to do something about it. I was like, wow, oh shit, wow, oh crap. Yeah, good stuff. Put 3 points, 5 out of 5 toughness. You are tanking. You're an armor tanker. Maximize that armor. No diminishing returns on armor. 3 points into improved Righteous Fury. And then you can do whatever the hell you want here. I'm just taking Benediction for shits and giggles. Really all we're here for is improved judgment. Nothing else is going to really move the needle here. If you're pugging, highly suggest or putting 2 points over here just to pick up improved lay on hands. Like we saw, Art of War isn't doing anything for us worth mentioning. So we might want to put 2 points into lay on hands, like literally not joking. Parry haste is going to do stuff for you, so you might as well put like 5 points into parry haste. at that point, yeah, and then just like Sacred Shield. So some variant of what's going on here. All you really need to know is that you're picking up Consecration, you're putting 3 points into Righteous Fury, and then you literally have nothing else better to do with your talent points other than to pick up Improved Judgment for SOR, and then to just kind of like, whatever with your talent points from there. Highly suggested that on progression, you use Sacred Shield. If you're pugging and your healers are questionable, use Sacred Shield. Use Sacred Shield, use Sacred Shield, use Sacred Shield. Art of War isn't really doing anything for you. If you are parsing as a tank paladin, and I would like to take a moment to bitch slap you that those words are coming out of my fucking mouth, okay? Bad pally tank. Bad. If you're parsing as a paladin tank in Season of Discovery Phase 3, then by all means take Art of War. It will actually get you the higher parse. But you should be taking Sacred Shield unless there's another a paladin around also taking Sacred Shield. 110,000% take Sacred Shield. There's even some really gross stuff you can do with Sacred Shield. So, for example, I mentioned this before, you're going to get really, really good in PvP at knowing when your Sacred Shield is about to pop. To me, it comes super naturally already because you get used to the idea of 6-second cooldowns in Classic World of Warcraft really quickly. Like when I'm fighting shamans, right? Their stuff is either on a 5-second cooldown or it's on a 6-second cooldown. So I have that number just in the back of my mind and ingrained onto my soul at this point as being like, you know, something to take note of. But the point I'm trying to make here is you can be fighting a boss and the boss hits you and you know for a fact that this hit is going to proc your Sacred Shield, and literally just cast a fucking Holy Light. Or just start Flash of Lighting yourself. Be like, oh, I got hit, let me just Flash of Light. Why? Because the Flash of Light has a 1.5 second cast time, and most bosses in Season of or Classic World of Warcraft have 2-second attack speeds. So you can get out the Flash of Light before your Sacred Shield is consumed. You get the _2 proc, you get the hot, you get all that stuff rolling. You can be a Giga Chad with this thing if you really want to. Yeah, and you don't have any, you have no pushback immunity on this Paladin build, but it doesn't matter because you're able to weave in a Flash of Light there at a precise time. So if you want to go all in on being a super Chad, you know, look for opportunities to get this hot rolling on yourself, and then you will be a super ultra mega terrifying Paladin. Part of the reason that Sacred Shield is actually worth a damn on this build is, number one, just how little Art of War was doing for us. But more importantly, it lets us start stripping off specifically belt and specifically bracers for some real spell power gear. Meaning I click this button up here, and next thing I know, I'm looking at what them mages are wearing that I might actually steal from them, if you know what I mean. I'm like, yeah, mages, what are we wearing out here? What's this? Engineering cloth bracers? 21 damage and healing, stamina, and intellect? Maybe I put those on instead. That's pretty damn good. Wow, it's also engineering? I'll take that to the bank. So hopefully you get the idea. You get to start seeing what the other classes are wearing, and very quickly you're just like, I'll take that massive spell power increase at this insane loss in armor. I don't give a fuck. Why? Because Sacred Shield is around and doing its thing. And that's going to probably tip the needle for you DPS-wise way more than Art of War. So yeah, I'm actually super in love with Sacred Shield tanking, believe it or not. And of course, this Paladin tank gets to take Horn of Lordaeron. Like, bleh, that's terrifying. The fact that you're bringing Horde of Lordaeron to the party, goddamn. Oh, and of course, if you have a spare talent point, let me just rip one out of here. If you need to, bing. You get Blessing of Kings, so you don't even need Hunter around. So you have Horn of Lordaeron, you have Blessing of Kings. I did the math, assuming you had a Horn of Lordaeron and Blessing of Kings. Just roll with it, take it to the bank. So anyways, I'm in the video here, and Deus Vult boys. Yeah, did this video instead of leveling. Damn, what a Chad.